we are going to head on over to Piers Morgan. Specifically because Piers Morgan had on a very special guest today. And that guest's name was, I believe his name is Hank Pecker. I think he had an American on by the name of Hank Pecker. And I think all of you are familiar with him. Just followed. What are we talking about? We're talking about Piers Morgan's interview with Hasan. Let's go, Hasan. Let's see. Now, chat. Before we get into it, what do you think? What do you think? Is Hasan going to have a good foreign policy take or a bad foreign policy take? Because it's really kind of a 50-50 when it comes to Hasan and foreign policy. Just followed. I just got into an hour-long argument rebutting Israeli propaganda on Insta. Thought I'd come here and brush up on my talking points / actual facts. I mean, if you have any questions, Snacky Lee, possibly I could answer them. I've watched it and Hasan did a good job. Okay, well, I'm excited for that because I am used to him having bad takes on Ukraine. So let's find out.
The hearts and minds traditionally played out through diplomacy and propaganda is being played out online. My next guest has almost 500 million views for his provocative commentary online, making him hugely influential. Hasan Piker streams live under the name Hasan Abbey. His analysis of the...
I do really enjoy the fact that he has the Queen with X'd out eyes on British television. Oh, that's so good. That's so good, dog. No, I think he said 500 million Xenomonic, which is probably accurate.
The Israel-Hamas war has taken a highly critical stance towards Israel and Western media, and he's been calling me out for my coverage.
Because he only cares about Israeli citizens. He does not care about Palestinians as human beings. That's why it's apples to oranges. It's like one side is a human, the other side is a barbaric monster child.
I mean, that is 100% a fair and accurate representation of Piers Morgan's views on Palestinians.
I never said that, obviously. He says that he'd like nothing more than to come on to Uncensored and call me a baboon in a suit to my face. Well, here I am, a baboon, and he can join me now. I'm joined by Hasan. Hasan, thank you very much for coming on.
Please call him a baboon in a suit.
Thank you for having me, Piers. It's very early here in Los Angeles, California, but I'm going to try to do my very best to...
Is he doing this in front of a green screen, dog? Are you green screening it right now? Amazing.
To not do my British accent while I'm here.
Well, I appreciate that. And listen, I appreciate you coming on. Explain to me why you consider me a stenographer for the Israeli government, given that in the last week, I think more than any other host in the world, I have given lengthy platforms to pro-Palestinian voices.
I do want to give Piers Morgan credit. We did cover Piers Morgan talking with the head of the Palestinian Nationalist Org, I think the PNO, or the PNI. PNI Palestine. Yeah, the Palestinian National Initiative. My bad. The PNI, which is a progressive, explicitly peaceful organization designed to try and peacefully get to a 1967 border two-state solution in Palestine. Head of it, really cool dude, talked about having been shot by snipers. My goodness. Are those cannons real or are you a man? They're 100% real. Homegrown booba. And, so Piers Morgan has had on pro-Palestinian voices. It's just that when he has on pro-Palestinian voices, he's like just a unrepentant cunt about it. He's just absolutely terrible to them.
To articulate that side of the argument.
No, I do have to commend you. You certainly have had more pro-Palestinian voices than the rest of the British media and certainly the rest of Western media in general. Now, as far as saying that you're a stenographer, I said that journalists are not supposed to be stenographers, and yet when it comes down to it, in most circumstances, in whatever conflict we may be in, there are stenographers for whichever party is aligning with the American State Department and the interests of the West in general. And Israel happens to be the one in this ongoing conflict.
But it's interesting that you call me a propagandist, because I want to play you. This was your reaction to when the hospital got bombed.
I'm a propagandist.
Well, no,
For the record.
No, I'm not calling
I'm a
you that.
propagandist.
I'm just saying. I'm going to play you.
I'm saying I am.
Okay, well then I want to
I'm
play.
saying I am.
I just
before
want to
you
put
even play it.
Okay, I'm going to play the clip. This is your reaction to the bombing of the hospital the other night.
While I was in the process of getting ready for the stream, Israel enacted one of the
Do you guys have any idea what they're blurring out on the screen? I genuinely have no idea.
singular worst strikes they have done thus far, and an Israeli airstrike hit the Al Ahli hospital in Gaza City, where thousands of civilians were seeking medical treatment and shelter from the
Has this been confirmed yet? Depends on who you talk to, Somniostatic. There are people saying they've confirmed, that it was like a missile that broke, or not missile, but like a rocket that broke apart midair. There are people saying that it was an Israeli missile. There are people saying they've disproven the IDF's, like positions on this issue and like the evidence that they provided, including like Al Jazeera and Channel 4. So we don't officially know what happened. There's no singular narrative on it. There might not ever be a singular narrative on it. Some of the photos of the kind of the area after the explosion, like the next day, show a small crater, but it's a relatively small crater. It doesn't look like it. Let me put it this way. To me, and I'm someone who doesn't know shit from shit about missiles, so take it with a gigantic grain of salt. What it looks like happened was a rocket broke apart midair. The munitions fell into this courtyard because most of the structure of the hospital appears to be fine. But what happened was the payload for this missile or rocket or whatever fell into this courtyard area where refugees were sleeping, and killed a lot of them because, again, they're clustered together in a courtyard. So I can easily believe that a bomb falling from the sky into a heavily packed courtyard, next to like cars that are, full of combustibles, I can believe that could kill a large number of people. So I'm kind of two minds, which is that it's very possible to me that Israel struck the hospital. They bombed it a couple days earlier, so it wouldn't be out of the question that they did it. It could also be a failed rocket from Hamas or from one of the other militant organizations in the Gaza Strip. That's also very possible. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter to me which organization did this specific one, largely because Israel's already bombed medical facilities. There are already medical facilities across the Gaza Strip that have been bombed explicitly, and also they've ordered the evacuation of dozens of other medical facilities, and that has been condemned as an act that will lead to the deaths of a majority of the people in those healthcare facilities. So, like, I don't really care about the culpability of this one thing. And in the fog of war, we might not ever have a definitive answer about who was responsible for this one thing. But when I look back at the greater whole, the more important thing playing out here is that the IDF is bombing healthcare facilities. Maybe not that one specifically, but predominantly healthcare facilities, ambulances. They are targeting ambulances and press. And so, like, at the end of the day, whether or not the IDF bombed this hospital or if there was an accident or something that caused this, that's not a fight I have a dog in. You know, this is at the end of the day, it doesn't change the fundamental dynamic that's at play here, which is that the IDF is committing war crimes against Palestinian civilians on a daily basis, and that should be the focus. I don't care to get sidetracked into like a 4 to 6 hour long deep dive into how, like, how missiles work, etc., and, like, you know, frame by frame the footage and stuff like that. There are people who are into that. More power to them. All I know is that it doesn't change the fundamental dynamic on the ground. I mean, Hammer their SIG, I would argue that the IDF is more guilty of terrorism due to the fact that they've terrorized far more people. You know, this conflict has displaced over 1 million people in Gaza, and the same cannot be said about the amount of people displaced in Israel. There is a deep power imbalance here, and that needs to be, you know, taken into account. Not to mention the history of post, you know, both in the lead up to and post 1948 Israeli state, which, you know, in 1948, over 700,000 Palestinians were evicted from their homes. It's been almost a century of terror for Palestinians, you know.
Relentless bombing campaign.
Now, interestingly, when you were saying that, I was coming on air too, and I took a position based probably on 30 years of being a journalist, running major newspapers, working at CNN and others, of waiting, of just saying, I think we should just wait and see what has actually happened here, get clarification, see who's actually to blame before we start passing judgment. You raced in to assume, as many people did, by the way, including the New York Times, BBC, mainstream media, and of
And I still lean towards, you know, Israel probably being behind it, but, like, it's not fundamental to my argument.
course, most of the Arab world then followed that this was clearly, indisputably, an Israeli airstrike on this hospital. And yet all the evidence now suggests very strongly that it wasn't, that in fact this was a rocket that misfired coming from a terrorist group inside Gaza. So my question for you is this: why would you be so certain in what you said before you knew?
Okay, so first and foremost, before we get started on this conversation, let's understand something very important here. There's no electricity in Gaza. Internet is patchy in Gaza.
Yeah, fair optimism.
There's no food in Gaza. There's no water in Gaza. This is all by design. This is because Gaza is under a brutal blockade, a brutal occupation by the Israeli government. Okay? So that plays a role in
I'm British, please don't ban me. Don't worry, friend. Being British is not a bannable offense in Riverboat Jack chat. Yet.
the fog of war and the misinformation that gets spread. Having said that, however, you made it seem as though there is a certainty that this was 100% not an Israeli airstrike.
No, I didn't.
And instead,
I literally just said it's not a certainty.
Okay, sorry.
I said the evidence is
Then
increasingly pointing to this not being an Israeli airstrike. And that is expert evidence from people who have no skin in the game at all.
Why is Hasan's head so tiny? Because his shoulders are so broad.
Yes. Well, I don't know which expert you're talking about, because I think Channel 4 did a pretty good job. As a matter of fact, I would say Channel 4 did probably the best job so far in analyzing everything that the IDF has said. But the reason
I will say that it, you know, to further like kind of the IDF is likely behind it. It seems like they've been putting out a lot of narratives that have been debunked. Like They claim to have audio of like guys discussing launching a missile at that specific time in that specific location, and that just seems very unlikely. And the audio clip seems to have been cobbled together. Like, does it like it's not like the propaganda they've been putting out has been insane and like just half-assed.
Reason why I believed, and I still do believe, that the
I speak Arabic fluently, and the two men talking don't have a Palestinian accent, and the convo just isn't normal. Yeah, like they're being hyper specific in a way where it's like, okay, now we need you two guys to mention that, you know, you're going to be at X place and it's at this time. You know, like it's like they're going through a checklist in the conversation. Oh, and Pina Patootie, you're Palestinian? More power to you.
likelihood is that this was an Israeli bombing campaign wasn't only because of the singular verifiable video, the phone video from the balcony that had all of the markings of an airstrike, the fact that the Israeli Air Force was enacting a bombing campaign in the region at the time, according to the Al Jazeera live streaming footage that everyone is using but doesn't understand, the fact that
and Al Jazeera, I believe, did put out a segment today, like debunking the Israeli claims. So I haven't gone over that or watched it. I just know it exists.
The digital media person for the IDF immediately came out and said that this was actually.
Yeah, they got clear audio of two guys in the middle of Gaza discussing launching a missile at a very specific time in a very specific place, and weren't able to anticipate a massive assault that had been in the works for multiple years. Curious.
An airstrike that hit a Hamas target, and that he was sad that there were, casualties at the end of the day, but this was a Hamas target and celebrated it. And more importantly, I guess, the fact that this hospital had been bombed by Israel. This hospital had been bombed by Israel on Saturday. 22 hospitals have, as a matter of fact, been bombed by Israel since this last saga in the occupation.
And Israel has threatened to bomb literally every healthcare facility in northern Gaza. So, like, it's not really that out of pocket.
And this hospital had been bombed directly by Israel, where the cancer ward was destroyed. Israel has been bombing all of these hospitals. Israel has been calling all of these hospitals to evacuate over and over and over again. The medical professionals at the hospital had been called by the Israeli government the day prior, and everyone on the ground assumes that this is an Israeli airstrike. They are the ones who experienced the situation.
Listen, Hasan,
so when you have
but the
every
truth
single,
is,
can I just finish this?
if you watch the BBC account of all this last night, by their Verify unit, which was specifically set up by the BBC to be completely dispassionate in these investigations. And they reached a pretty clear conclusion based on circumstantial evidence, I'll make that clear, that this would not have been an Israeli airstrike, including, for example, the size of the crater, which bears no relation to the size of crater.
Cute attack.
Oh, Catalina Gearbox, thank you for the $5 dono. I'm not looking at that link until we're done with this. But yeah, the size of the crater is odd, but I don't know that can't be explained by multiple factors.
It is normally left by Israeli. So look, my point is, neither of us know for sure, but you took to your airwaves immediately because actually your, I wouldn't even say unconscious bias, your admitted propagandist bias on your part was that you wanted that to be an Israeli airstrike. It suited your narrative.
Exactly,
and I would say that in itself, in its way,
wanted it to be
is being a stenographer. Well, you accuse me of being a stenographer. I try and be fair and get to the truth. In your case, I don't think you try to do that. I think you appeal to your audience, appeal to your base, and you don't really care whether the facts are there or not.
This is entirely unfair because you just said circumstantial evidence favors that this was not an Israeli airstrike.
Yeah.
I gave you all of the circumstantial evidence that it does favor that this is an Israeli airstrike. The reason why, however, circumstantial evidence.
Well, so Sean DeGeek, I think the narrative for that there are basically now two competing narratives, and one is not that it was intercepted, because it does not at all look like it was intercepted. But the The alternative to that is that the rocket failed, meaning that like part of it broke apart midair, and then the payload fell down. Hasan is at a disadvantage here because he cares. Absolutely.
This is not enough. And the one thing that I will concede to, because when more information did come out, and no, I do not mean when Israel said that they did not bomb this hospital and it was actually Hamas, and then they turned around and went, never mind, it's not Hamas, it's actually Islamic Jihad. And then they said, we have more evidence coming out in a couple hours. And then the evidence came out, and it turns out it sounded like the phone conversations that they were able to intercept, supposedly, sounded like, by experts at the very least, to be completely false and completely made up.
Yeah, but Hasan, I don't think. Listen, in all honesty, I don't think even as you're saying all this, I think you're a smart guy.
Piers, let me finish.
I think you've looked at all of this, and I think in your heart, you know this was probably not an Israeli airstrike. And I'm just curious why you would, instead of admitting that as facts change,
that is
your
not
opinion
what I'm
change.
saying. That is not what I'm saying at all.
I don't understand why you would double and treble down when the evidence is pointing the other way.
You're asking me to be on your show. Do you want to talk?
Yes.
If you're asking me to be on your show, and I want to be on the show, thank you so much for having me on your show. Let me explain exactly what I said, and let me explain to you why I think still, to this very moment, until there is a third-party investigation that is concluded by the UN, the International Criminal Court, or specifically a forensic analyst that looks at the situation, is allowed to be on the ground. This is not just my perspective. This is B'Tselem as well, which is an Israeli organization.
Yeah, it is a war crime to attack, buildings dedicated to religion, education, art, science, charitable things, historical monuments, etc. Those are all war crimes. Yeah.
That has also demanded a third-party investigation occur. I am not going to conclusively.
Yeah, but by the way, it would be really easy to sort this situation out if Israel allowed international investigators into the country to investigate the scene, which they are not going to do. Crazy, huh?
Say that this was not
I don't
Israel's
expect you to.
fault.
I
Why?
don't expect you to.
Because I just gave you, and not because I'm a propagandist. As far as me being a propagandist goes, everyone is a propagandist. I'm just honest about it. You're a propagandist. We have our biases.
I'm curious who you think I'm a propagandist for.
Honest about my biases.
Who do you think I'm a propagandist for?
Who do I think you're a propagandist
Yeah.
for? Whichever
True, G. Klein.
every media person is.
I would encourage you to reach out to White Nervosa. That seems like something they might be able to incorporate into their website.
Is doing propaganda.
But who for? I've got to be doing it for somebody.
You think it's a bad word? I don't. That's just the difference. This is a semantic.
Yeah, Hasan's going into a hostile interview. He's doing pretty well. We're about halfway through it. Like, he's doing well.
I think it's actually quite a serious charge.
uninteresting.
Hasan, I think it's a serious charge to level, not as a podcaster, but as a journalist who's broadcasting around the world, who has a reputation, I believe, for being fair and impartial, actually, on these issues. It's quite a charge to just say, I'm a stenographer for the Israeli government, or I'm a propagandist. I don't think there's any evidence that I'm either of those things. I'm curious who you think I am doing
While
the
we're
propaganda
having this
for.
conversation, 3,000 Piers. While we're having this back and forth, 3,840 Palestinians have been ruthlessly slaughtered in the last incursion into Gaza. I feel like this is an incredibly selfish, self-centered conversation to have. You asked me to be on here. You wanted to hear my perspective. I'm willing to give it to you. I don't want to talk about I don't want to talk about Noam Chomsky style manufacturing consent conversations about how the media is operating in the behest of capital.
You were the guy. Listen,
I think
you were the guy that called me.
There are dead people.
Listen, Hasan, I only asked you because you're the guy that called me a propagandist and called me a baboon in a suit. I was curious as to why. You don't want to say who I'm doing the propaganda for. We'll move on. I agree with you. There's a big.
Hasan should call him a baboon in a suit again to his face.
Yeah, there's a bigger picture here. Let's move on. Let's take a short break. Hasan, let's take a short break. I want to come back. I want to talk to you about what happened on October the 7th. Get your reaction to that.
Whew. Oh, of course. He wants to redirect the conversation to October 7th and get his reaction to that. He wants to ask Hasan several times if he supports Hamas. God damn, dude.
Welcome back. Hasan Piker is still with me. Hasan, I want to just play you a clip of something that you said about the October 7th terror attacks, and in particular, the attack at the music festival, which killed 260 people.
Look at this guy. You know what shouldn't happen? Killing 260 people at a music festival. No, you're right, man. That just happened on its own because, like, bad guys wanted to do bad things. You're right. Dude, if they subjugated you to a open-air prison your whole life, you're going to break out eventually when you realize that there's no other way to get out of it.
Okay, that's a bad take. That's just a bad take. Yeah, not gonna lie. That does look really fucking bad.
I mean, it sounds to me there, Hasan, that you are in some way saying...
How? Well, because Hamas, like, isn't striking a blow for liberation there. They just killed 260 people who were non-combatants, you know? I don't know what the context is. I'd be willing to listen to it if I heard the full clip. But, like, just on its own, that sounds pretty bad.
They had it coming. Were you?
No, I wouldn't say that they had it.
No, like, there doesn't have to be a but. You can say that slaughtering 260 civilians is bad while recognizing that a far greater and ongoing crime is being committed by the IDF. These are not mutually exclusive concepts.
Coming. I think that Michael Brooks used to say, analysis is not justification. And while
Yeah, like, exactly. Understanding why something happened isn't justifying the thing. And I think, again, we always need to keep that in mind for situations, especially when they get messy in these regards.
while obviously civilian casualties and horrific barbaric acts that were committed on October 7 are completely unacceptable, the important thing to make sure that it never happens again is to...
I am heartened to know that Michael Brooks is still doing good work out here.
To analyze what are the conditions as to how it happened to begin with. And I think...
Oh, and Neurosledge, to be clear, it isn't unexpected, right? Like, the Israeli military knows, like people who are up on the chain of command in, like, the IDF, they know that the conditions within Gaza are unsustainable. They know that. They know that this is going, that, you know, violent outbursts are going to be, like, the result of how they treat Palestinians. But the thing is, they're controlled by politicians, and people like Netanyahu want things like this to happen. It's why Netanyahu and the Israeli government propped up Hamas for like over a decade. They've been funneling resources to Hamas, and like this is why. You know, they are the controlled opposition. And they use this outrage to further oppress the Palestinian people and to further their own political ambitions. And my fear, my deep, deep fear that I've been saying for weeks now, is that Netanyahu is looking to liquidate the Palestinian people. He's looking to, for his own final solution, because the usefulness of the periodic attacks of Hamas have run their course. I think this is exactly what is happening, and I am deeply, deeply, deeply afraid. Because it has been a cycle, Foxy Cheshire, but I think he's looking to break the cycle in the worst possible way. And I'm very afraid for what happens when the ground invasion comes. Which, by the way, the latest news on that is that the IDF has the green light to begin its ground invasion anytime. Yeah, like the AP News is putting out articles saying Gaza awaits aid from Egypt as Israel readies troops for ground assault. So it's looking likely that it's going to be, you know, any day now. I'm really fucking scared for the Palestinians in Gaza.
I think Ehud Barak is going to be on in a little bit as well, or maybe he's on
Yeah, he
before
is,
me.
yeah.
And I'm almost certain that while he has held the keys to the conversation and held the levers of the power in this conversation in many key and critical points, I would go so far as to say that he is among many others who also recognize that the
Yeah, there have been a lot of mixed reports on aid getting through to Gaza. Like last I heard, like only like 40 trucks were being allowed into Gaza. Like it's the situation is currently insane. The aid corridor was previously agreed upon, but now it seems like it's still being closed. I don't know what to make of it, frankly.
Netanyahu administration is responsible. This is not just my assessment. This is 85% of the Israeli population's assessment at the time. This is years and years and years of refusing to negotiate with the Palestinians.
No, they are plotting genocide, Foxy Cheshire. All of the propaganda, all of the words from people leading the war council in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, Yoav Gallant, these people are saying like that they plan to genocide the Palestinian people. I heard an NPR story today that spoke of tons of Israeli soldiers needing donated gear. They can't invade without helmets, knee pads, etc. It was nuts to listen to. There is no way that the Israeli military is hurting for gear. I don't believe that. And if they are hurting for gear, it's because like they called up all of the reservists in the country, and there's like 500,000 troops getting ready to invade on the ground. They're sending around propagandists to their troops that are talking about the need to pick up a gun and kill all your Arab neighbors. Like, and that's your duty as like a Jewish man in Israel. It's insane, dude. The amount like the saying, like, listen to people when they tell you who they are. They are screaming from the rooftops. The people in charge of the IDF are screaming from the rooftops that they want to kill every Palestinian in the Gaza Strip. Listen to them. Believe them when they tell you that, because that's what they're trying to do.
Authority. Don't take my word for it. Take Netanyahu's personal word for it.
I would agree again.
In a closed-door conversation with Likud members, he said that if you want to thwart any kind of Palestinian nation state, you must do everything you can to only negotiate with Hamas. We control how high the...
No, it's not even... Netanyahu didn't even say, must do everything in your power to negotiate with Hamas. It was, you need to fund Hamas. Let me, yeah. Here we go. Yes. Do we have the quote in here? Yes. According to various reports, Netanyahu made a similar point at a Likud faction meeting in early 2019 when he was quoted as saying that those who oppose a Palestinian state should support the transfer of funds to Gaza because maintaining the separation between the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza would prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. Like, specifically says that. Now, maybe those multiple reports are incorrect, but that seems to be a stretch. So, just throwing that out there.
How high the fire goes. He has given cash to Hamas
Right.
by way of Qatar. There is no bigger fan of Hamas
Yeah, over $1 billion transferred to Hamas by the Netanyahu government.
than Bibi Netanyahu, which I hope one day you can maybe.
My dude,
interview,
thank you
and then
very
you'll
much for
ask
the
him
raid.
to-
Welcome,
No, I
Raiders.
actually did interview him a few
condemn
months
the
ago,
violence of
and
the
I
Israeli
did
government.
actually spell out to him that there have been a lot more Palestinian deaths this year so far, up to the point of the interview, than Israelis, and what he intended to do about it. He said then he didn't believe in collective responsibility, which is now this hot phrase in this whole crisis about whether you would hold all people in Gaza responsible for Hamas. Interesting to see if
Wait,
when they.
can I ask you a
well, let
question?
me just
Do
finish
you-
my
do
point.
you- do
If
you
they
believe
do
him when he
then
says
launch a
that?
ground invasion,
Behind the Bastards did a really good episode on what's going on with Netanyahu's family and Palestine, Jack. Oh, hey, wrestling with the news. I need to listen to more Behind the Bastards. They make really, really good content, and I just sometimes I just don't have the spoons for it. But I'll check out that one on Netanyahu. Thanks for looking out.
it'd be interesting to see if they keep to that word. I'm not a defender of what Bibi Netanyahu has been doing in Israel. In the last year, his attack on the credibility and integrity of the Supreme Court, I think, has been a disgrace, and I think it has fractured
What about the current war crimes he's doing, Piers?
the society in Israel. I also think that it's caused so much social unrest and had such big protests that you could argue it's taken the eye off the ball of the people who should have been defending the border because they've been trying to sort out what's been going on domestically, internally inside Israel. So I think it's a catastrophic failure of intelligence, of security, of defense, all of those things. I'll be amazed, frankly, if Netanyahu survives this. So I'm certainly not here to defend him, even if you do view me as a stenographer.
It's
for
all
the
good,
government.
Hooker Booker.
My question for you, I think, is this: is that I've had a lot of problems trying to get people on the pro-Palestinian side to separate two things. That you can say, as I believe and you believe, that the Palestinians have been maltreated for decades. That the situation where they are effectively, I mean, I don't even.
I guess I would say that the but Nero Sledge is that my main issue is that Hamas is not on the side of Palestinian liberation. It's not. It uses the cause of Palestinian liberation to recruit people into its death cult, but it's ultimately another tool of the oppressors. It is the controlled opposition supported there. So it's like it's inevitable actions of a people who are being, genocided and systematically ethnically cleansed from their land, and it's like it's understandable that violence would result from that, but at the same time, like Hamas should not be we need to be very clear about the line of what's going on with Hamas, because I feel like more people need to know that Hamas is directly another tool of settler apartheid oppression.
Call it an occupation because Israelis aren't in Gaza. They pulled out in 2005, but they still control the ability of Gaza.
That is, this is why I call you a propaganda.
I got you, Nero
I'm
Sledge.
just saying the phrase
I'm just saying it loud for the people in the back,
ideology is confusing to me because the reality is Israel exercises control over people in Gaza. It allows them in and out. It allows them to turn on the tap of water and so on and so on. I get all that. They don't actually live there because they can't live side by side with each other.
That's why it's called an open-air prison.
Right. I don't
That's
disagree
why they
with.
call
I
it
don't
the world's
disagree.
largest open-air
Yeah, but
prison.
Hasan, I don't disagree with you, and I have pointed this
Okay.
out for a long time as a journalist. So we don't.
Cool. You maybe point that out a little bit louder, Piers. Maybe point that out a little bit louder.
Don't disagree about the appalling plight of Palestinian people. But the issue comes that if you can't separate that ongoing dispute between Israel and Palestine from the absolutely appalling barbarism of October the 7th, which was on a whole different scale to anything we've seen, where 1,400 people, Holocaust survivors, babies in their cribs, young women taken, tortured, abused, shot, beheaded.
Israel,
it was
meanwhile,
reported, and so on.
Sorry.
If we can't look at that collectively, with a general humanity and agreement that is an absolute atrocity, then there's something wrong with this. And I find that the
Yes. Do you condemn Hamas moment for Hasan?
tribalism on both sides is now so toxic and so frenzied that you get people who literally can't. We've had a bunch of actors right, signing this statement saying they want a ceasefire in Gaza and calling Israel war criminals and so on. But they don't say a word about the Hamas attacks that precipitated this. And I find that
But you
really
agree with
hard,
them, right?
really hard to accept.
But do you agree with them? If they had said, for example, that October 7 attacks were brutal and massacres occurred, and then they said everything else, that Israel is committing war crimes, would you agree with them?
Okay, here's what I would honestly say about that. Is Israel not allowed to defend itself?
Can one defend themselves without doing war crimes, Piers? Can you defend, like, if somebody punches you in the street, do you then just go murder their entire family in self-defense? No, you don't. No. That would be an unreasonable reaction from an individual. Obviously, it's a far more unreasonable action from a state.
From the worst terror attack we've seen since 9/11. Is it not allowed to defend itself
just odd.
after
You said you're not a
1,400 people in Israel
propagandist.
are butchered in that way? And the question then, if you assume that they are able to defend themselves, as any
Piers,
free
that is
democratic country,
that is the
then the
Israeli
question
State
becomes,
Department line.
Hassan,
That is the IDF's line. That is
Hassan,
the line that everyone
Hassan,
is
let me ask you
channeled.
this. It then becomes a question of how can they defend themselves? If their mission now is to get rid of Hamas, a terror organization that's committed one of the worst acts of terror ever seen, if that is their stated aim, then what they are doing is consistent with that, isn't it?
No. Here's why this is actually an abject failure, and this is not just my perspective on the matter. I'm just a dumb idiot with a Twitch stream who is live reacting to the news and trying to make sense of everything as it's ongoing. I usually have a policy of not covering breaking news, and
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true, but okay.
And sometimes that policy is violated, but ultimately I am not held up by the same journalistic standards, even though I think I do a much better job than most other news outlets in general. So
that was such a weird statement to make. Like, I try not to cover breaking news, but I do, and when I do it better than mainstream news, but I also try not to do it. That seems weird, especially given that I feel like most of the time I see him commenting on, like, topical news stories. I don't know. Hooker Booker, let's not fight. I think a lot of people in chat are on the same page here.
let me just say this really quickly. You said Israel has a right to defend itself. Absolutely zero people think that this is a ridiculous statement. However, how Israel is defending itself is collective punishment. Now, collective punishment in the form of depriving 2.2 million people of electricity, collective punishment in the form of depriving them of water, of food, collective punishment of
like, I mean, there wasn't it was a fumble, right? Like, there wasn't a need to deprecate his expertise or his framing. You know, he could have said that in a sentence, in like a much shorter sentence, and moved on. You know, like, I'm not an expert in this field, but, you know, and then listed out this stuff. That would have been, I think, a lot better of an answer. But again, overall, the number of issues I've had with this interview are very small. Like, Hasan has been knocking it out of the park for the most part.
In the form of 51 people dying in the West Bank, where, you know, there is no Hamas in the West Bank, and yet 51 people have died because in the West Bank, settlers that are occupying Palestinian territory in violation of the international law, settlers who are doing an act of colonial terrorism, and this is not my statement on it, this is international law, that are doing horrifying things by simply just existing there and maintaining the presence with an occupying force in the form of IDF, who is ritualistically humiliating Palestinians in a structure that B'Tselem, an Israeli organization.
By the way, again, every time B'Tselem comes up, you absolutely should support B'Tselem. They are an Israeli human rights organization that is explicitly built around condemning the Israeli apartheid state. So, yeah, very, very good organization, and very good takes on the apartheid state.
Calls the permit regime.
We've
where
gone over
every
their work a few
waking
times on the
moment
channel.
of Palestinians' lives in the West Bank are absolute hell, where they have no legal recourse. 51 Palestinians have died, and that was before the Ramallah, the Ramallah protest that happened last night, and the Israeli forces were opening up with live fire on protesters last night. So who knows what that death toll has become? This is all a product of Israel being an apartheid state. This is a violent apartheid state. There is no way to be a peaceful
all right, Hasan,
apartheid
let me ask you
state.
this.
It
Let me ask you this.
is a violence.
Let
It
me
is a
ask you
violence
this then.
required for its maintenance.
Okay, listen.
And that violence is frustrating people.
I hear
that
you.
violence
I
is
hear you.
radicalizing people.
But here's
Hold
my-
on.
I hear
as
you.
far as Israel, as far as what Benjamin Netanyahu has done, as far as the war government, what they have done, Piers, going into Gaza
Yeah.
and bombing Gaza and killing 3,480 Palestinians so far in Gaza, 1,000 plus children out of all of those casualties, 22 hospitals being bombed, a bakery, the only remaining intact bakery being bombed yesterday. These are horrifying crimes that you would openly say are horrifying and unjustifiable when Russia does it, but when Israel does it, Israel has a right to defend itself. This is identical to the same talking points that I've heard from every Israeli administration official. It's the same talking points that I've heard from American politicians championing the exact same talking points. It's the same thing that I've heard from everyone else in the media. You might have been against the Iraq war, and you use that, but you're using that for evil, in my opinion, at this point. If you are not sitting here and condemning those acts of war crimes, those acts of violence, those acts of collective punishment.
Well, I would say to that,
Goddamn. Absolutely killing this interview. Good stuff.
that I think the death of any child in this conflict is horrific, absolutely horrific. But the question comes down to me that after an act of terror, as we saw on October the 7th,
After an act of terror, is a country not entitled to kill as many children as it needs to in order to feel safe? Like, that's what he's saying, right? That's what he's about to say.
Israel should be able to defend itself and should be able to go after the people that perpetrated that, who live
Yeah.
amongst civilians in Gaza deliberately.
Should Israel not be able to just bomb as many babies as they want in order to kill one Hamas fighter? Really makes you think.
And the question for me becomes down to what is proportionate. I don't know the answer, Hasan. I'll be honest with you. I don't know
What is proportionate? Not this. Clearly. They have enacted a systematic policy of ethnic cleansing against 1.1 million people, Piers. That's not a proportionate response. What should Israel do? Israel should implement a two-state solution. That is implement a ceasefire, begin talks for a two-state solution, and actually implement one. That is the solution. The problems within Gaza are largely predicated on the fact that Israel currently does not allow for power generation within Gaza on a wide scale. There's only one power plant in the entire area, and it is, fun fact, a fuel-based generator that Israel controls the fuel line to. And also, controls the water. They use the IDF backing up settlers as settlers go and pour concrete into wells in Gaza, denying clean drinking water. They control the flow of medical supplies because, again, you can't leave the Gaza Strip if you're a Palestinian. You can't get out. You can't cross over into Israel unless, and this is, again, in best case circumstances, unless one of the border guards just agrees to do it, which means that there's a rampant bribery of border crossings into Israel. But now they're all closed. You can't get out. And normally, people would do trade through the Rafah crossing, which is the only border crossing not controlled by Israel. But Egypt closes that down too when stuff like this happens because they don't want millions of refugees entering their country in the middle of a desert that is not prepared to receive refugees. Additionally, hey, if you're a Palestinian and you want to go out and fish on a boat, well, too bad, because if you go out too far, Israeli military vessels will sink your boat and kill you. So you can't even try to hop in a rowboat and try to like row your way to safety if you're a Palestinian in Gaza. And if you're thinking, well, what if you just sought a better life in a different part of the occupied territories? Good luck, because guess what? Depending on which city you live in within Gaza or the West Bank, well, you have different travel rights. Depending on which city you live in, you have the ability to go to certain cities, but not other cities. And there is like a tiered system of who gets to go to which city. It is actually insane, which, by the way, is why I would recommend you all read the apartheid report put out by B'Tselem. It goes into a lot of detail about how traffic and travel between different cities within Gaza and West Bank is controlled, and it is insane. So, again, the proportional response is not just bomb everybody. If you actually wanted to solve the problem, what you would do is you would provide resources to nonviolent organizations like the Palestinian National Initiative, which is a political party in Gaza that is dedicated to nonviolence and peaceful solutions, and it advocates for a two-state solution upon the agreed-upon 1967 borders. And the main issue is that Israel doesn't want the 1967 borders anymore because over the last, 50, 60 years, they have built up illegal settlements that have been condemned by the international community because they are in Palestinian territory. So if a two-state solution was found on the 1967 borders, well, then suddenly a bunch of Israeli settlements would suddenly become governed by Palestinians. And that is unacceptable to the state of Israel. Additionally, they don't want a one-state solution because that would integrate Palestinians into the Israel body politique. They would have to be enfranchised and have equal voting rights. And that would change the voting demographics in Israel, which, for obvious reasons, the fascist far-right parties do not want. They do not want Palestinians on equal footing with Israelis in a theocratic state. So, Israel, for a long time, has both rejected a one-state solution and rejected a two-state solution. But if you actually want to end this cycle of violence, if you actually want to have a productive relationship in the Middle East, then you have to make concessions, and the 1967 borders seem to be the best way to do that. And frankly, it's a whole mess. And my fear, again, to reiterate, having now said all of that, is that Netanyahu and the far-right fascists in the Knesset are plotting a way to get a one-state solution without having to enfranchise a critical number of Palestinians, and that involves killing all of the Palestinians in Gaza or forcing them to flee via an explicit campaign of ethnic cleansing and genocide. So, there you have it. What is Israel to do? Israel is to go and fund the PNI, go to the table in good faith with peace talks, being prepared to acknowledge that some of those illegal settlements are going to wind up under Palestinian control, and move on from there. That would be my recommendation. That is the only path to peace outside of what Israel is currently pursuing, which is genocide.
What that answer is.
I do know the answer to that. Last night I had Dr. Ofer Kassif, an Israeli Knesset member who was expelled suspended for 45 days for saying what I believe is the truth. Championing the exact same position of the Haaretz's editorial board.
Well, that's what I mean. I think my fear is that they have decided upon a one-state solution, and it is the one that involves ethnic cleansing and genocide.
There are a lot of thoughtful people, a lot of formative Holocaust scholars, a lot of historians that all agree on the same point. The reason why violence that even penetrates through the Israeli security blanket that people thought existed, that penetrated through that Iron Dome, the Iron Wall, if you want to call it that, is because of years and years of oppression and years of violence, which is a necessity to maintain an apartheid state. And this has to stop. There's only two ways out of this. Either you engage in full-blown ethnic cleansing, and if you listen to the likes of Smotrich, or if you listen to the likes of Itamar Ben-Gvir and these
or Benjamin Netanyahu,
very unfavorable, unpopular, far-right figures, if you listen to Netanyahu and his Likud government, they say that they are interested in going in that direction, the ethnic cleansing direction, the ethnic displacement direction, or the only way out of this for a real solution is to move towards peace, to genuinely end the blockade, to end the apartheid, to end the occupation, and create a pathway towards citizenship for all people with a right to return, for all 14 million Palestinians, 5 million of which live under Israeli occupation. It's brutal. And then the rest living in diaspora. These are not unreasonable requests. These are requests that understand the dignity and the humanity of one side and does not simply treat them as their colonial subjects.
Hasan,
and it's the only way to create permanent security and prosperity in the region.
If it was as simple as that, I'm sure that would have happened already. I would say this.
Yeah, if it was as simple as having a right of return for Palestinians. Yeah, I'm sure that seems very simple. I
agree with a lot of what you've just said. Not all of it, a lot of it. I don't think you can ever.
I want Piers Morgan to say exactly what he agreed with that Hasan said. I want Piers to say what he agreed with. I agree with a lot of it. I agree with some of it. Wait, which parts did you agree with there, Piers? Which parts? You fucking liar.
Achieve peace now with Hamas controlling Gaza. I don't think you can achieve peace with Netanyahu in charge of Israel, actually, afterwards. I don't think his own people will want him to be in charge of Israel down the line when they examine exactly how this happened. But we will see. But Hasan, I've got to leave it there. Look, it's good.
Yeah, how this happened, not what he has done. Not the explicit ethnic cleansing of Gaza.
To talk to you. You know, you're an important, influential voice to a lot of.
Does Hamas control Gaza, though? Yeah, by and large, it does. I mean, there are other political groups for sure, but it is the main like governing body in, as much as you can say that, in Gaza. But to be clear, Hamas is unelected. The last elections held in Gaza were in 2006. So, well, the Palestinian Authority is in charge of the West Bank, but not in Gaza. Hamas has de facto control of Gaza. And also, like, my understanding is that Hamas is not well liked by Palestinians. Well, I mean, yeah, one hand wonder, like, if we could get a secular government in Israel, like a one-state solution would obviously be a better one, that prioritizes, equality under the law and all of that stuff. If we could get that, that'd be amazing. And don't worry about it. We're all really frustrated. It's a really frustrating and horrific situation that we keep coming back to every day. Like it's not improving, to say the least.
Of people, And I
Yeah, and to be clear, like, they control Gaza, but like they're not productive. The main thing they do in Gaza is like they rule Gaza like, you know, a gang rules a certain neighborhood. You know? They shake down businesses and funnel most of their money into their militia efforts. They do other certain like small things for people in communities, but like they're basically the only provider of services such as they are in the Gaza Strip, is my understanding.
Base chair streamer.
I hope Hasan condemns them. I'm sure he does. I Oh, you got me. You got me. You got me, Somnia Static. Kyrie, thank you for gifting us sub to One Hand Wonder.
think we have a lot of common ground, and there are some things that we disagree about. But I suspect it's not as much as you think.
Which things do you agree with him, Piers? I really want Hasan to ask him which things that I said about the IDF do you agree with?
You know, I do think that the core problem here has got to get resolved in a way that's been completely ignored for decades. And until it gets resolved, until the plight of the Palestinian people is resolved, until all these young people in Palestine feel there's some sense of hope and they can get out of what effectively is, as you say, a prison camp, then nothing is going to change. I don't think it justifies
Well,
in
it's
any.
not
I don't
just
let me
that.
just say, I've got to finish it, but I don't think it justifies in any way what happened on October the 7th. But I do agree with you that until that core problem gets
It doesn't.
resolved, there will never be peace. Sam, I appreciate you joining me. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you for having me.
I think Hasan kicked ass. I think 99% of that interview was Hasan kicking ass. That was really, really great.
You know those harem animes where the hero is transported to another world or time? What if instead of a hero they summoned a supervillain?
I think I think there are lots of anime like that, actually. Yeah, he did all right. You know, I disagree with his foreign policy takes when he talks about Ukraine. I think that when he talks about the Israel-Palestine situation, he's not super careful about his phrasing, which makes him easy to be clipped out of context. I think overall that was a really, really great interview.